are continuing in our Kingdom Parables sermon series, just taking a break from the book of Galatians. So we entitled this sermon series, The Kingdom of Heaven is Like, because that is a theme that Jesus kind of has in a lot of his parables, particularly in the Gospel of Matthew, where he gives us these parables or stories to kind of illustrate as metaphors of trying to get to different facets and ways of understanding God's kingdom. And so this morning, we are going to be in the Gospel according to Matthew. And we are going to be in Matthew chapter 22, the first 14 verses. So as always, I encourage you to have those Bibles in your hand. Keep them open during the sermon to refer back to things, make sure I'm not making anything up, all of that so that you can keep track. Even though the words are on the screen, there's nothing like having the actual physical Bible in your hand. And so this morning we're in Matthew 22, and once again, as the gospel reading, would you stand as you're able? Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find.' So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good. And the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, 'How did you get in here without wedding clothes, friend?' The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen.'" This is the word of God for the people of God, and we respond, "Thanks be to God." You may be seated. So, a woman was about to be married, and everything was prepared. Everything was paid for. We were ready. But just 12 days before the wedding, the bride calls it off. Can you imagine? 12 days before. But she and her family were left with the full bill of the reception at the country club that they were going to have it at, because the club required 60 days notice for cancellation, and she called the wedding off just 12 days before. So the family and the now ex-bride decided that they're not just going to be out all this money, they're going to skip having wedding guests. And instead, they invited homeless neighbors from the local shelter. And so 50 close friends and family and about 40 homeless neighbors enjoyed the full menu of what was originally a wedding reception. And they just danced the night away. They had so much fun just being able to be together. And afterwards, they packed up leftover food, and there was so much food still left over that they were able to send that leftover food to the homeless shelter for those who couldn't probably make it. And they had food for days afterwards, still able to enjoy the wedding feast. And everyone had had fun, and the former bride was pleased that something turned out to be so wonderful and nothing went to waste. invitations, especially unexpected ones, are really, really awesome to us, right? We love to be included. We love to be invited. We have this sudden joy of joining with others to celebrate an event like a wedding, or to simply be together at a meal or a party or whatever, right? Those invitations where someone is just like, just come just because, right, are probably some of the best invitations, because it tells you you're wanted. You're wanted. But the kicker is that we need to respond to that invitation, right? We can't just leave it hanging out there. We have to respond, yes or no. Are you coming or not? So Jesus' parable, and remember this is an illustration, a metaphor in story form, gets after this point of invitation and the necessary response. He teaches many times about what Matthew in particular calls the kingdom of heaven. We also see it as the kingdom of God. And it's this present and future reign of God that has been longed for by the Jewish people. But Jesus is correcting their perceptions of what does this kingdom actually look like and what does it entail to get there. Jesus gives us these stories in order to help describe the indescribable, to bring the holy into our everyday lives and situations and our everyday language. The kingdom of heaven that we need to understand is not merely physical, right? It's not it's not a geographical point necessarily, like Pastor Taylor has explained before, but it's a kingdom that is spiritual. There is a physical element to the kingdom, right? That when Jesus comes back, the world will be renewed. We're not just going to be these spiritual beings floating in space, but we're actually going to be on a renewed creation. But there is spiritual. Jesus tells Pilate, right, that his kingdom is not of this world. Jesus' kingdom is not coming with force and might and power like we might anticipate the kingdom to come. But it's a renewing of the created world, the way that it was supposed to be. So it's important for us to know that the kingdom of heaven is both present and future, what we like to call an already not yet thing, right? We get glimpses of the kingdom right now as Christians, as believers in Jesus Christ, but there's also a not yet component. It's not fully here yet. Jesus coming into creation got the ball rolling, but we will only be completely here when he comes back again. And he's going to claim the church and fully reign in all of his authority and glory and power. So a kingdom and a king. I want to maybe address some of this language. It feels counterintuitive to us, right? Having a kingdom and a king reigning over us, it feels weird to us as Americans, right? Because we had a whole war about overthrowing a king. We like our individuality. We like our freedoms. We like our democracy. We all want to have a say, right? And nobody better tell us what to do. But that's exactly what we get with Jesus. He's the one who gets the final say, not us. He's the one who tells us how to live our lives because he knows there's so much better for us in his original design. He wants us to get even just a glimpse of that beauty, of what it means to truly be human as we were created to be in his image, right? Then continuing to live in the broken cycles. When we live under Christ's rule, in his kingdom, we actually are more free than we are if we live outside of his kingdom. And I want to be clear, there are, in a way, two kingdoms that we can choose to be a part of. There's the kingdom of Christ, where we are more free and more human than we could ever imagine, and there's the kingdom of darkness. And there's a ruler there too. and it wants to keep us captive by making us think that we're free when really we're in chains. God calls us to be truly free, to live in the peace of his kingdom that he's continuing to build and make known through his church, right? We don't build the kingdom. God's building the kingdom. But we get to make it visible to everybody. So this morning, I just want to kind of go through this parable and kind of just break it down a little bit of what the kingdom of heaven is like when it looks like a wedding feast, a wedding banquet, or a reception. So perhaps, obviously, we might have quickly picked up, right, that the king, who is the father of the groom, is understood to be God the Father, right? We're following that? God sends out invitations to the heavenly banquet of fellowship in his kingdom to the people who are supposed to be there from the start, the people of Israel. Yet we see here that the first possible response to God's invitation is rejection. We're allowed to reject his invitation. But this isn't just any rejection of uninterest in a free meal. This is a rejection that is loaded with excuses. The original invited guests deem the feast unimportant in their list of things to do. They have better things to do that will, in their mind, make their lives better. One person has to tend to his farm. The other person has business to conduct. And other people just don't care, and they want to mistreat the messengers. God invites us into his presence daily. Not just at big events, not just on Sunday mornings, and not just at Christmas and Easter, but every single day. And it's easy in our culture to make excuses, isn't it? We're all busy. We all have busy lives. But if we applied the logic of excuses that we use for church or spending time in devotion or Bible reading or in prayer to other parts of our lives, it would make no sense. Take, for example, washing up. If we refused to wash because, I was forced to wash as a child and I really don't want to anymore. Or soap makers are just after your money. What if we said, I only wash up on special occasions like Christmas and Easter? We might say, I used to wash up, but it got boring, so I stopped. Or I'll start washing when I'm older and I'm dirtier. Or we might say, I can't spare the time to wash up. Doesn't that sound silly? Kind of gross. We're so quick in our own ways to make excuses about why we don't have the time, why this thing in our past makes us not want to do it anymore. And that includes we make excuses to not be part fully of the kingdom. We might not want to read our Bibles. We say, I don't have time to read a chapter. Yet how many of us, myself included, end up scrolling for way too long on our phones? Us younger ones might be on social media, or we might be looking at the news apps, right? And just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Instead of coming to worship at every single opportunity that we have, and not just on Sundays, we decide that we need another day to just be a couch potato. Oh, I didn't get to really rest the way I wanted on Saturday, so I'm going to make up for it on Sunday. But y'all, worship is restorative. Worship is supposed to be restful in a way. Most of us, I think, don't mean to reject God outright, right? It's not necessarily that we don't want anything to do with God, that we don't want to be part of his kingdom. We just have this funny little thing called pride. And it gets in our way. We have more pressing matters to attend to. After all, God's always going to be there, right? I mean, he's waiting for us. He'll just be there when I'm ready. Maybe on the flip side of pride, though, we might think that we're not good enough to come to him and receive the blessing and fellowship that the King of Kings is inviting us to. And so we would rather focus on making ourselves presentable, making sure that we have something to show for our lives to prove that we've done enough to earn a place at the table, right? So on one side, we have pride, and we think that, we just have too much going on. We can't make time. But on the other side, we might think that we aren't doing enough, and we have to earn our place. And that's usually when, as we see in Jesus' words, God will get rid of the distractions. God will get rid of the distractions for us to finally listen. To get our attention, God will tear down in order to rebuild. He will destroy the kingdoms we have made in our own image so that we will finally look up and see the kingdom of God that is so much more rewarding and everlasting, and is much less of a burden than any kingdom we might build for ourselves. Another way we might respond to God's invitation is kind of a half-hearted acceptance. Okay, so we don't want to reject him, but we want to accept, but it's going to be half-hearted. See, God is reaching out to all of humanity, and he extends that invitation over and over and over again, just like our king for the wedding banquet. If people say no, that's their choice. He wishes they would come, but God's not going to force them. If people say no, that's their choice. And he'll continue to invite others, including those we wouldn't expect to be invited into that space. And here's the hard part that Jesus gets to by the end of the parable that is unique to Matthew. If the guest isn't properly dressed, isn't properly prepared, then he's thrown out. And this part of the story is kind of hard to understand maybe, because we think, well, why is he thrown out? He responded to the invitation of the king, right? Why is the king now throwing him out? That's kind of rude. Shouldn't the king be happy that the guy came when everyone else said no? And here's a sticky point. Because perhaps those who ended up attending, they happily put on the proper attire, right? If the dress code for a wedding says semi-formal, you're not supposed to come in jeans, right? Maybe some of them didn't have the proper attire, but they accepted some extras that the king maybe had in a spare closet just for this occasion. They accepted help. But this man, we see, turns up not in the party clothes that he's supposed to be in, which would signify that he respects the king and he respects the occasion. And he doesn't want to change. He wanted to come get the benefits of the banquet without being properly prepared and without wanting transformation. This is getting after us wanting to accept the salvation that Jesus brings, but we don't want to have to change. We want to be part of the inside circle, but we want to keep up our lifestyles. We want to keep up the way that we do things. Half accepting God's invitation, however, leads us to the exact same place as those who reject God's invitation. We end up outside the kingdom because we still refuse to fully participate. Half acceptance leads you to the same place as rejection, outside the kingdom. Wanting the kingdom on our terms is just as bad as not wanting it at all. We still feel like we have to earn it somehow, or maybe we feel that we're fine just the way we are. When we stay in this half acceptance, we are unable to grow. We are unable to fully benefit from God's grace. We're unable to actually be free and joyful and at peace. Pastor Taylor, as y'all are very well aware of by now, is in the National Guard, and he's been in for 16 years now, and his original training is in EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, so a bomb tech. And you can see why I was nervous when he and I dated, right? It's really serious, and it's rigid training because you don't want to make mistakes with things that go boom. Part of being in the EOD is wearing a special suit. The soldiers have to be able to move and operate in a 90-pound, sweaty, bulky suit, all while moving quickly yet carefully through dismantling explosives. Without the proper protection, and without the proper training, and without the proper mindset, Taylor wouldn't be able to handle the bomb. And he could actually put himself and others in danger if he was unwilling to do the hard work. Likewise, we can't merely accept the invitation to salvation, but we must be willing to truly know God as the host and king. We should come ready not just to accept the original invitation to the feast, but we should be willing to accept the assistance, the call to transformation that comes with it. So we have rejection, we have a half acceptance, and there's a third option, full acceptance. This is the best response, by the way. We can fully accept God's invitation to the kingdom banquet. That means we accept his invitation to salvation from sin and death. We accept to join him in making his kingdom visible now in the present and to be with him in full in eternity. And when we fully accept the invitation, we are saying we want to be changed. We want to be different. We don't want to stay the same. Full acceptance is to not be the guy who gets thrown out because we didn't want to put on the right stuff. Instead, we accept God's offer to clothe us. And God clothes us in his own righteousness and holiness through Jesus. So once again, I'm going to say that this is hard for us because our pride doesn't want us to be clothed in anything we didn't do. We want to work for it. What's wrong with how we came anyway, we ask, right? So I want you to hear me, church. Our Father loves you just as you are, right now. Our Father also knows that there is more for you. He meets us, and he accepts us where we are, how we are, but he is not going to leave us where we are. We cannot stay at the banquet unchanged. So what do? We put on the identity of Christ, which is freely given to us. These are our wedding clothes. What we might call the mercy robes. We put on the mercy and grace and righteousness and holiness of Christ. These are our party clothes. God is constantly sending out invitations to join in the salvation that he brings. He wants us to be free from the sin and the brokenness. He wants us to be redeemed and reconciled through Jesus, that we can be united with him again through his own Spirit working in and through us. The Father sends out messengers to give us the gospel, that we desperately need to hear every single day, even as those who already believe, because guess what? We forget the gospel every single day in some shape or form. He has given us his written word for us to know his story and his will for the world. But guess what? You got to read it. It doesn't do any good collecting dust. And he sent his son, the living word, to make the doors swing wide for anyone who would come. When we show up, brothers and sisters, are we willing to be covered completely by Christ? Or are we still holding on to shame and striving on the one hand, or pride and thinking we have better things to do in the other? One of my favorite theologians, N.T. Wright, wrote this about this parable. He said, the point of the story is that Jesus is telling the truth that political and religious leaders often like to hide, the truth that God's kingdom is a kingdom in which love and justice and truth and mercy and holiness reign unhindered. They are the clothes that you need to wear for the wedding. And if you refuse to put them on, you are saying you don't want to stay at the party. The kingdom of heaven is where love, justice, truth, mercy, and holiness reign. These are our clothes for the kingdom. And we don't come up with it ourselves, but it is a gift of the one who invited us in the first place. He makes it easy to be prepared. He makes sure that we have the tools to be ready to come and join. Remember that bomb suit I told you that Pastor Taylor has to wear? He can't put it on by himself. It would be too much, too heavy by himself. He has to have help putting it on and then taking it off. We are clothed with Christ's love and holiness, not our own. And we don't get there by ourselves. That's why Jesus came to die and rise again in the first place. So this morning, I hope that we each decide to fully accept the invitation to the kingdom feast that God sends each one of us every single day.